You think that you enjoy the game more than I do. It's a nonsense way of looking at the sport, right? And it's exclusionary. And Chris, you are the problem. Anytime Chris says something, you can just press me playing, you are the problem. I get former players say that to me all the time. Oh, you don't really enjoy the game, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't enjoy the game? Motherfucker, I watch 100 hours of cricket a week. How much do you watch? If Steve Smith was going to be a top 10 test batter of all time, I would have slapped you. Who's picking Stuart Broad ahead of Dale Steyn? Stuart Broad wouldn't pick Stuart Broad ahead of Dale Steyn.
Worst hot take you've ever had that aged like milk?
I once said that Australia should take a dead donkey to England before Steve Smith.
Stuart Broad being better than Dale Steyn.
It really isn't. That is maybe the worst hot take I've ever heard in the history of the sport. And I've heard some rippers. Netizens agree. Jarrod Kimber destroys the Sports Entertainment Weekly hosts. Yeah, Ben Duckett. No, Ben Duckett's number one. He's ahead of Bradman. Because Bradman was only as good as he said as he ended up because of Ben Duckett, right? Which is very fair.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of Sports Entertainment Weekly. You're usually used to four armchair experts discussing cricket at length, like we know what we are talking about. But for a change, we have a legit expert today on the show. The one and only Jarrod Kimber, the man who does not really need any introduction, especially for people who listen to Sports Entertainment Weekly, because our good friend Rehan here keeps invoking Jarrod Kimber in every other conversation anytime we have to deal with statistics. Thank you so much for joining us, Jarrod.
It's the only way to do it.
There's no other name I'd rather invoke.
Until you get a tattoo of me on your arm, I won't believe it.
Oh, he has one already.
It's not on his arm.
Tramp stamp. Makes more sense.
Wow. He has to find a new purpose in life because this is all he has waited for about 5 years now. Conversation with the Jarrod Kimber. You have a book out now, The Art of Batting. It's not the first book you have written, but by your own admission, the most professional book that you have written, if we can use that term.
Yeah, I suppose it's the most thorough is maybe the best way of putting it. And it's probably the first time that everything has come together. Like, obviously I do a lot of stats, but I also do a lot of history and I also do a lot of analysis. So it's like, and I'm a writer, even though I do a lot of podcasts and videos these days. So it's kind of bringing everything I've ever done together in one thing. Whereas if you look at all the other books, they're probably just focusing on one or two things, right? So certainly the book I've tried the hardest on, I tried to get correct, and was the most fun book that I've ever worked on.
Right. All right. So we have all read the book in different degrees based on our availability, and the list
different. Everyone read a different chapter.
That's the idea. Just like how we used to prepare for exams.
Yeah,
there was
exactly.
never enough time for all of us to read everything. We're like, we are sitting in the same hall together anyway. Do we all need to read everything?
That makes sense.
Right. So the list, for people who haven't read the book, it's the list of top 50 test batters based on statistics and numbers and not vibes. Well, some of us here like
I wouldn't say it's just I wouldn't say there's no vibes. It's we went back and looked at everyone from Greece that we could find video on. So we looked at aesthetics, we looked at footwork, we looked at how much someone shaped the game. So, someone like Jarrod Kimber is incredibly important for how batting is today. Like, it would be unfair to not mention that, or Hanif Mohammed or WG Grace or Ranji. So there's some vibes there as well. But yeah, we tried to do it as subjectively as or as objectively as we could of what is still a subjective list, I should say.
Right. Gandalf and I were happy because now we get to throw your book to anyone who says Kohli is better than Steve Smith. So as you can see, both of us happen to rep Australia, and for the first time on the podcast,
we are pretty much walking billboards of Australian cricket in India. Chris recently moved to the UK, so we're like huge diehard Australian fans. So thanks, Jarrod, for taking time. Just probably bringing it here. you probably might have seen a wider range of cricketers across various eras you speak about. Um, the amount of cricket that used to be played probably made you look at a wider time frame for certain players of those eras versus now when the intensity is too much, there is too much, the sample size is big within a shorter time frame now.
Yeah.
So this gives you the opportunity to make the next top 50 pretty sooner than, wait for another 20, 25 years to get that number of matches played. So
yeah, I think if you look at the NBA did a thing a couple of years ago where they looked at the greatest 75 basketballers. Actually, it might have started with the greatest 50 basketballers of all time. And all they do is they add an extra basketballer for every year. But basketball is way bigger around the world. And Europeans and South Americans and Australians and all these different countries are taking up to basketball. And it's that's not how you need to do it, right? There might be 10 great batters that come in the next 10 years. And in the 1920s and 1930s, it might have been 5, right? There's so many more cricketers playing. So you always have to keep that in your mind.
That is also
yeah.
one of my
Just a follow-up question, Chris, if I may. So, Jarrod, who do you think from the current crop in the last 4-5 years of Test cricket, who do you think will make it to your top 50 if a sequel comes out?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. I suppose the obvious ones are Brook, Kaminder Mendes, Jaiswal. Trying to think if there's anyone else off the top of my head. I don't think Travis Head would be able to get into it unless he did something really dramatic from here on in. There's Brevis and Stubbs, I suppose, in South Africa that are not quite on the level of the other guys I mentioned, but incredibly talented. Is there anyone else in the world that's coming through? I know when we were writing the book, originally Babar Azam and Marnus Labuschagne were in the long list. Actually, I should say when we first started the list, they were both there. And by the time we started writing, they were both basically cancelled out, right? So that tells you how quickly things can change. If you look at Kaminder Mendes' record and you compare it to, say, someone like Mark Taylor or Jimmy Adams, we've seen players start like him before and then crash, right? But there's no doubt that he's a freakishly talented player, and so is Brook, and so is Jaiswal. So those are the 3 that most obviously come to mind, unless I'm forgetting anyone else.
Do you think?
How dare you miss Vaibhav Suryavanshi?
Well, I mean, I don't even know how old he is, man. So by the time I write the next book, he might only be 21. He actually sometimes it's like he gets younger by the day, but. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put him in that list. I really like Matra is probably another one that I would be interested in. And I suppose you could throw Cameron Green in as well, of someone who might go on a tear. Like Cameron, I don't think we've seen the best of Cameron Green, right? And so as he matures, he could have a big 5 or 6 years where he puts on a lot of runs. But yeah, it's really hard to predict that sort of stuff. I mean, you look at American sports, how often they get the draft wrong, right? It's very hard to tell. I think if you'd have asked me in 2012, and by this stage he was already pretty good, but if you'd asked me in 2012 if Steve Smith was going to be a top 10 Test batter of all time, I would have slapped you.
Also, I do have a
So
follow-up.
are you basically talking? So sorry. So are you basically talking from data and projections when you mentioned Yashasvi, Harry Brook and others, as against Travis Head, who generally the perception is that he's probably a clutch player, so to speak, who's actually helped Australia win the WTC, the World Cup, some of the really important matches in recent memory.
Well, you're already struggling there because you've mentioned a World Cup. Well, how does that make him a good Test batter? Right. So you have to remember what the question is here. Is he going to be one of the greatest Test batters of all time? He currently averages 42, right, with a good strike rate of 67. If he continues to smash the ball around, he's probably still going to have to make a few. I know this is a low scoring era, so we cut him a little bit of slack for the fact that he's played in a very tough era. But if he ends up averaging 45, 46 with a strike rate of 70, 75, 80, which are all possible for him, I think he comes back into it. But how many years does he play? He doesn't look like the greatest athlete I've ever seen. I don't know. He's already 31. This might already be his peak. He might already be on his way back down for all we know. So comparing that to all the other guys I'm talking about, you're talking about players with incredible hand-eye coordination. They're already used to making runs at a young age. It would make more sense to project one of them to be in the list than it would Travis Head, even if Travis Head has obviously already touched levels that those guys haven't touched yet, right? it would be very hard at the moment if you compare Travis Head to Adam Gilchrist, right? Who averages what, 5 more than him at a faster strike rate, right? In a slower era. So at that point, where are you going with that? It's tough. But Travis Head is still within touching distance of it. There's probably, I'm trying to think of some other, if there are any other sort of Usman Khawaja. He's another one that's really interesting. He wasn't far away from the list, man. His numbers are incredible, but he was dropped in the middle of his career and averaged 35 in first class cricket. So I was like, well, how is that fair to other guys who were playing Test cricket when they were failing, and he wasn't even playing Test cricket? But if Usman Khawaja decided to play for 4 more years and kept averaging 45, he'd have to be a pretty good chance of coming back in, wouldn't he? So yeah, there are some current players. Shubman Gill is another one that should eventually. I don't think Shubman Gill's had his surge yet, but I would assume one day he's going to have his surge. But yeah, of the sort of that next crop of players that are coming through at the moment, the ones with the best sort of game at the moment or the best chance at the moment are probably the ones who, and that's what fans do. We go towards the next great thing rather than looking at the players who are already there. But I think Travis Head would have to do a lot to make this list. Shubman Gill would have to quite violently change around, whereas Jaiswal could probably have 3 years where he averages 42 now, and he'd still be a pretty good chance of making it if he continues on the trajectory he has at the moment.
So you did invoke the NBA, and we also kind of mentioned sample size briefly. So the NBA or MLB, baseball, we look at it, there's a huge sample size. There's a lot of games that happen in a year, throughout the year. So you have a lot of data that you look at. As opposed to when you mentioned here, you were looking at the older batters, you were going off of videos. So how do you quantify something you watch, right?
It's so
the
hard.
feel-good factor.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Like George Headley plays 22 test matches. Probably if World War II doesn't break out, he maybe plays 35. Like it's still not going to be a lot of test matches that he ends up playing. Ranji doesn't play a lot of test matches. Trump up, Grace. You have to take at a certain point the weight of what other players of their era said about them. So for instance, WG Grace watches Trump a bat and gives him a bat and says, the game's now yours. I think that tells you where Trumper was in that era of cricket, right? It wasn't like Grace to ever say anything nice about someone who wasn't himself, right? Like the fact that he did that, I think tells you a lot about Trumper. You look at Ranji, and Ranji, not only was he a great bat, and his numbers stand up really well for someone who didn't play a lot of games, he clearly changed the game, right? So you have to factor in that before Ranji, the leg glance didn't exist, and the only way you would ever hit the ball to find leg was an inside edge, right? And suddenly he opens that up. That's a huge change in the history of our game. So he gets a little bit of a bump there. You then with the older players, what we do have is a lot of first class cricket. So you can see there are some players with very good test records, and you look at their first class records, and you're like, I don't want to say it's a fluke because that would be unfair, but maybe they got a few good pitches, maybe they got some bad attacks, maybe they got dropped a couple of times. But if you're averaging like 50 in test cricket and you're averaging like 35 in first class cricket, I think it's probably, and you haven't played a lot of games in test cricket, I think it's probably fair at that point to be like, it maybe doesn't hold up as well as you want it to be. As you said, going back and watching video gives you a good idea of how good someone is. Like I'm lucky enough to have watched a lot of old players on video. Over the years, I've been to a lot of events where people show stuff. I've had people send me clips that aren't available online. Some Pathé friends and all this sort of stuff. You get a pretty good idea of what looks like good batting in each era, right? And you can tell even from photos. Photos of Trumper and Hobbs are really, really good to give you an idea of just how good they were. In fact, I've seen footage of Neil Harvey. But if you look at the photos, look at where Neil Harvey is intercepting with the ball, and you're just like, well, the crease is like 3 meters back. Like this man is like, how fast was he? Right. And then you read someone else go, oh, Neil Harvey was the quickest batter I ever played against. Right. And you're like, okay, great. So I've got a photo of it. And now I've got another great batter saying the same thing. So you're constantly doing that to fill in the gaps. Right. And then, we know that you said George Headley before. I'm trying to think of when George Headley made his debut. So maybe 29, and he plays his last test at about 46 or 47. So that's a 17-year career, right? We can't say he would have been average 60 if he played all 17 years and if he played in modern cricket or anything else. But what we can say is for 17 years, the West Indies had a great player available to them, right? Whereas Jonathan Trott was a really good player for England, right? But he did it for about 8 years. So with all due respect to Trotty, who's a friend, like I love Trotty as a person, we know more about Jonathan Trott, the batter, right? But 8 years is not a very long time. That's a short career, right? Whereas Sachin Tendulkar and Jack Hobbs are over 20 years, right? You're always going to say, but if England look at their batting lineup and for 22 years or whatever it was that Jack Hobbs played for them, they never once had to go, oh, we're going to need an opener here, right? That's a huge strength for your team. Whereas England, for the first time in a long time, had a dependable number 3, and then he was gone, right? And then they had to find 2 or 3 other number 3s, or maybe 5 or 6 number 3s in their case, to fill in for him, right? That matters. So that all of those things play a big part of when you're looking at how great someone is, right? It's, you know, if you were to say to me, who's the better bowler between Dale Steyn and Jimmy Anderson, every one of us is probably going to pick Dale Steyn, right? But if you say to me, if you had to pick a career tomorrow, you might pick Anderson because you get an extra 4, 5, 6 years of peak performance. And even if he's not quite at Steyn's level, pretty close to Steyn's level for a long period of time. And that's what you're doing constantly. You're doing that. And then you're doing it across eras. Then you're doing it, you know, with different, you know, like Ranji, we talked about before. I think Ranji might have been as good as his numbers suggest. But one of the reasons Ranji wasn't picked is because he wasn't white, right? And there were certain grounds in England that wouldn't pick Ranji to play for them because he wasn't English, right? And so I'm not going to hold that against Ranji, right? That's not his fault. But I am going to look at his first class record. And if he'd averaged 38 in first class cricket and 46 in test cricket, I'd be like, nah, there's something here that doesn't spell right. But he averaged more in first class cricket. And I'm like, nope, they were all racist.
Oh, Jarrod, you beauty. You might have just solved one of the long-standing debates that has ripped our group apart in recent times. Who is better between Mitchell Stark and Bumrah and Dale Steyn and Stuart Broad? I'm not going to say who picked who here, but
wait,
do you think there was a
choice between Dale Steyn and Stuart Broad?
Exactly.
Okay.
I think Jarrod was mentioning Jimmy Anderson, not Stuart Broad.
Who's picking Stuart Broad ahead of Dale Steyn? Stuart Broad wouldn't pick Stuart Broad ahead of Dale Steyn.
There's only one person on God's green earth I've ever seen do that. And I
think you should drop out now.
Yeah. Please leave the call.
You brought it up. It's the longevity.
Yeah.
Broad is far more reliable.
Look, I think Stuart Broad's a fascinating one. Like, I haven't got to the bowling book yet, and you know, I'm hoping to have a deal in place shortly to be able to do that. But it's fascinating, right? Like, you know, Stuart Broad is incredible. But how many more years did Stuart Broad play than other bowlers? Like, I think Courtney Walsh doesn't have as many wickets as Stuart Broad. Courtney Walsh has a longer career and bowled a lot more in professional cricket than Stuart Broad did. And I think they're comparable bowlers. I think Walsh is better, but I think they're comparable bowlers, right? But when it comes down to it, you also have to have done what Stuart Broad did. How many other great batters would have been able to make as many runs as Sachin Tendulkar or Sunil Gavaskar in a similar time span? Just because eventually their back would have gone, their eye would have gone, their feet would have gone, their knees would have gone. You know what I mean? You have to be able to do it day after day, I think is a really, really interesting one. But when it comes down to it, you know, I think we can work out how good someone is and still say that, you know, Dale Steyn and Kane Williamson have not been tested in the same way that Joe Root and Jimmy Anderson have. Doesn't mean they might not be better than them. That's a different conversation, but they haven't been tested in the same way.
So I do have a follow-up. So you did mention like literature that you went by. But there is a problem to literature, right? So one of the main reasons why Kapil Dev's, just a small reason why Kapil Dev's like 183 is regarded as one of the best knocks is because not many people saw it. You can write about it however you wish to, right? The same can be said about like Ben Stokes if there wasn't enough media coverage. He's somebody who plays a lot of great knocks as opposed to who consistently gives you enough batting returns. Like Kusal Pereira played that amazing knock. So don't you think literature might have like give greater importance to players who play these generational knocks rather than somebody who gives you consistent runs?
Yeah, I think the best case of that ever, if you want one, and it's completely random, is Victor Trumper and Clem Hill. We went
Gilbert
through Clem
Jeff.
Hill's numbers, and they're not that much different than Victor Trumper's. I think there's a couple of things with Victor Trumper is he was a pioneer and Clem Hill wasn't. Well, Clem Hill's a pioneer, but I'd say Clem Hill's probably the first great left-handed batter, right? Like, he's probably the prototype for what becomes quite popular after World War II, and he's doing it 50 years beforehand. But we looked up his strike rate, and he strikes really quickly as well. And I've never seen anyone mention that before, right? That Clem Hill was really quick, but he wasn't as quick as Trumper. I think he averaged roughly the same amount, but he didn't have the same impact. But he also didn't change the game the way that Trumper did. And a lot of the literature, when it's written that way, and this is not my first historical book. I did a book on the history of Test cricket. And I wanted to go back and prove that the 2001 Australia-India series and the 2005 Ashes series were not as special as everyone remembered. And there were these other series overlooked. And you go back and you're like, actually, they probably were. I can see now why everyone was so obsessed with them. These things didn't happen very often. And when they did happen, quite often, there wasn't cameras and everything else to be able to do it. And so the media wasn't as good and everything else. So there is cases of those players slipping through, right? And Ken Barrington would be a really good one. Len Hutton, who we have really high in the list, right? I don't think people speak highly enough about Len Hutton. But when you're talking about literature, Rayhan, you are talking about some old fat journalist who's 80 meters away who probably had bad eyesight and actually wanted to leave early and go to the opera that night. The literature that I read was players talking about players, right? Because that's really interesting. I found some great old books written by cricketers about, Ted Dexter's book is one of the best ones, but there was a couple of other ones. There was, some other, clips that we found. That's, listening to Wilfred Rhodes talk about Victor Trumper, suddenly you're on a different level of like, well, Wilfred Rhodes is one of the greatest players of all time. And, he's being positive and negative about Trumper. Aubrey Faulkner is one of the greatest all-rounders of all time. And Aubrey Faulkner is like, I was really good and I couldn't even touch Trumper, right? You then start to understand that there is a level to these players. But you have to be careful because what happens with players is they remember the guys who played really well against them. They remember the guys who they played really well against. You're like, Sachin, I got Sachin out all the time. No problems with Sachin. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't just do that.
Hansi Cronje?
Yeah, Hansi Cronje. I didn't interview him for the book. He wasn't in the book either. But yeah, so when you have to be a little bit careful with players, but you do get a bit of a sense, and especially with the S tier level players, it's really, really clear. So Ken Barrington is a perfect example of, you can find a lot of players who are like, look, the thing with Ken Barrington was he didn't make many mistakes. And when you first hear that, you're like, oh, so he wasn't that special. And then you start to think, wait a minute, isn't that what batting is supposed to be? And they're like, you don't understand, Jarrod. Sobers would change the game a lot more quicker than Ken Barrington was. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. I'm not saying that Barrington was better than Sobers, but I am saying that Barrington looks pretty good. Like, if someone who never makes any mistakes seems like a pretty good player to have. And so after a while, you have to piece that together. It's not easy, and there's a lot of nonsense written. And then you're like, I talked to Ian Chappell about Bob Simpson because Bob Simpson was one that really confused me. And I've seen some lists where Bob Simpson is as high as like 30 in the greatest batters of all time list. And I was like, that doesn't feel right to me. But I talked to Ian Chappell, and I'd forgotten that, of course, Ian Chappell and Bob Simpson hate each other, right? And so all I get is literally Chappelli moaning about Bob Simpson. So then I have to go and find two other experts, right? Like, to balance it out. And one of them was someone who loved him, which was Bumble. And Bumble's like, look, he's really good. He really was. I don't want to pretend that he's not. But I don't think he's on the level of the guys that you need to talk about in this book, right? But then you need to know that Bumble loves attacking players, right? So Bumble's like, Alistair Cook in your book? And I'm like, of course Alistair Cook is in the book. He's like, is he above KP? And I'm like, yeah, he's above KP. And he's like, I can't be above KP. I'm like, I think he should be above KP. Yeah. But then you ask Bumble all of his favorite cricketers, and it's just attacking players, right? There's no defending players, right? And so everyone's got that bias. Once you get to the point of sort of understanding the bias of the player that you are reading about or following, it becomes a lot easier, right?
And I love how
it's not like,
you account for this bias exactly, right? Sorry about that. I love the rank ranges you have. This is not a set in stone list. Somebody like Sachin could be your number one or number two. Somebody could have Steve Smith as a top 5. Like for me, from what I've seen, he seems to be between 4 and 7. I love that style of chronicling and listing in your book. I think we don't have that today, especially with the wars we have going on. That's the biggest problem. Everything has to be in a superlative. No, Kohli is the best. No, Rohit Sharma is the best. I think your book captures that beautifully, where somebody can be, higher up in your list or mine, but they are going to be in a specific range. Neither of us are going to argue about it.
Exactly. And I got that from the Thinking Basketball podcast. That was the bit that fell together, because I had thought about doing something like this before, but I didn't know how to intellectually do it, because it's nonsense, right? Jarrod Kimber is the 22nd best batter of all time. Well, what the fuck does that mean, right? Like, that could mean anything. It's complete nonsense. It's not nonsense, though, to say that Jarrod Kimber is probably somewhere between the 20th best batter and the 32nd best batter. I think that's pretty. I think we could all be pretty solid on that, right? Like, there's a guy who never averaged less than 50 in Test cricket, probably played on a little bit too long at the end of his career, had holes within his game, like, it wasn't good everywhere, right? But an incredible batting genius, right? I think we could say that pretty safely. And so then what's the argument to have him higher in the range? I think part of the argument is that he changed the way that people bat, right? And that he wasn't just making his own runs, he was making runs for other people into the future, right? And someone like Kevin Peterson, I think you can make a pretty solid case. He's probably between the 40th and the 60th best batter of all time, right? Like, I would argue, I don't think you could have him in your top 40. I don't think you could have him outside your top 60, right? But if someone came to me tomorrow and said he should be the 60th best batter, I'd be like, give me that case. And I'd listen to him and be like, I can see that. I can definitely see that. I've gone the other end. He's closer to 40 in my list, right? And that's what I wanted to do, because not only will other people have different opinions, I will have a different opinion, right? I will probably use new metrics. I will do more research. This book is already, I've now got people with old footage who I never even knew had all this footage going. Do you want to see this guy's innings? And they've got like full ball by ball stuff of some of these people, right? Like, or an hour and a half of like an old Gavaskar innings that I couldn't find, right? That's going to change the way I think about these things going ahead. I will change as a writer, as an analyst. So I will do that. And so what I wanted to do is go, I think you make a claim that this person could be as high as this, and you can make a claim that could be as low as this, right? I don't think in good, I'm not God, right? I wasn't the only one who worked on this list, but the final list is certainly a lot to do with myself, but I'm not God. Like, I can't tell you, I don't even believe in God. Even if there was a God, I don't believe that God could tell you exactly how good anyone was. Right?
Jarrod, small correction there. We all see God. He wears the shirt number 10 and used to bat for India at number 4.
Oh, okay. Shubman Gill. Is that Shubman Gill? So I don't. Do you know what I mean? The idea that me, who wasn't around in the 1800s, could tell you where someone should be exactly on the list, I don't think that's possible. But the idea that someone like me and a team of people could get together and put together, 15 or 16 different metrics that we looked at for each player and come up with a pretty good range of where they come out, it's fair. There's a couple of biases within this, that some of which I didn't have beforehand, that came about from writing the book. I think I rated attacking opening batters higher. I think one day I might move Matt Hayden lower down in the list, right? I think I still held on to a couple of players like Muhammad Yusuf, who made a lot of runs, whereas actually I think I could be a little bit tougher with them. I think I proved to myself now that I'm not a slave to overall batting averages, and he batted a really good era on some very good pitches, and maybe he moves a little bit down lower. And there's some other guys like Graham Gooch, maybe Graham Gooch is the best player in his 30s, to play, to mature later. And then also was a great player against the West Indies. And maybe I need to move him a little bit higher, right? Like, I'll move people around a little bit.
But that's why you have Ben Duckett as 12 on your list, right?
Yeah, Ben Duckett's number 1. He's ahead of Bradman.
Okay.
Because Bradman was only as good as he said as he ended up because of Ben Duckett, right? Which is very fair. So I think you have to make allowances for that. And as the question came before as well, more players are going to come in. I'm going to learn more about cricket over the next 10 years than I already know now. And so I might be like, oh, okay, I see, because of what this guy does, I used to think that other guy was special, but actually now I understand that this is just a more natural thing, and lots of people have the ability to do this, or the opposite. Or it might be like, so Mike Hussey is not in my top 50. I might think back and talk to more people about batting in their 30s and be like, do you know what? I understand why I didn't put Mike Hussey in the top 50, and I had a very good reason for not putting him in. But now I think maybe he should be in the list, right? You know, these sorts of things should be what you are doing. If you just say this is the list and it never changes, don't ever listen to a human being who says that, because they're just talking out their ass.
Let me ask you this: was there a
Jarrod?
name that, yeah?
Yeah, I have a quick question. So, Jarrod, a lot of people have written about cricket history in the past. A lot of people will write about cricket history in the future. Do you have any advice in terms of what methodology to follow
It's really
while
really
writing
tricky.
about cricket history?
Yeah, it is really tricky because English media is actually, I don't know. I follow like cryptozoology and conspiracy theories, and you don't realize how important the English media was to spreading all those things. Because papers like the Daily Mail in the old days would take anything off a wire, right? Like even fake articles that were intentionally fake, and spread them around the world so that suddenly everyone thought about it. So there's a great story from the Isle of Man where there was this family who convinced everyone on the island, well, not everyone on the island, they convinced 5 people on the island that there was a talking mongoose in their house, right? And for a year, everyone in the world was talking about this talking mongoose. And so there's so much bias towards England and English cricket and the MCC and everything else. I think you have to, everything that you look at in cricket has to be through the colonial mindset, right? The imperial mindset and the colonized, right? So you almost have to peel back the layers off that and then really hit the pavement to try and find local reporting on some of these things. And it's not easy, right? And you have to understand that everything that was written in 1950s was written through the idea that England was still the mother country, and it was very, very important to everything else. And if you're not writing from that perspective, you are misunderstanding the way that things were being written at that time. So I think from a cricket history perspective, that's one of the most important things. The other thing is that there isn't enough interviews of old cricketers, right? I just did a podcast with Menes on his Australian podcast, and he was just saying he doesn't understand why Cricket New South Wales won't just interview like every player who's ever played for them and make sure that there is an audio of it and we can hear what their life story was, right? So imagine that if you're a historian. And when I was doing this book, like one of the toughest things was finding cricketers who played with Len Hutton, because they're all dead, right? And I wanted to talk to someone alive, and I was like thinking to myself, like, I'm going to really struggle here. And if I would have been able to find 10 people who played with him, right, that would have been who are still alive, that would have been almost impossible to have done, let alone whether they could speak now or anything else. So speaking to cricketers from the 60s, 70s, 80s, right, we're starting to see cricketers from the 80s and 90s pass away, right? Like Simons and Warne are gone. Like, we're going to lose a lot of important people. We need to get their records on. They are all instrumental in the sport that we have. So we have, and they're not doing anything. They're not hard to find, these guys. Like, do you know what I mean? Like a couple of phone calls and you could find, if you get a hold of one of them, they get out their old notebooks and they've got all their friends' phone numbers that they could give you, right? The famous ones are tougher to get to, but the average cricketer is not that hard to get to. And if you want to talk about history, you want the guys who were there. I found this great story a while back about this game where Middlesex didn't turn up to the game, right? And I just tracked down a guy who played in the game, and I got the full story. And the full story's never been written. And he was the guy who was there, and the rest of his team was stuck in traffic, right? And he gave me all these details and I've seen this story reprinted 30 times without any of these details. And finally, I got the full story of it, right? And you get that all the time when you talk to these guys. They're like, oh, no. The reason this happened was this. Actually, it's funnier than you said. No, he wasn't asleep on the other side of the ground. He did a shit. And he didn't tell anyone when he went to the toilet. And that's why he was retired. Like, those are the stories that you actually get when you speak to these people.
Trending term in cricket involved, right? Baseball, trending term for a while. So you mentioned strike rate quite a few times. It's not necessarily to do with baseball, but faster scoring players, right? So Abhishek Mukherjee has said something about this as well. What faster scoring players, they allow the bowlers to have more time at their hands to take those 20 wickets.
Yep.
as opposed to what happened like before. So does like how does bowling strike rate become relevant for a bowler? Like for example, Kagis or Rabada, right? Some of the best strike rate in Test cricket.
Well, what he's basically saying is that if I can score 350 runs at 5 runs and over, right? My bowlers don't have to worry about pushing the game forward when they bowl. They can go out there and they can just bowl knowing that there's plenty of time left. They don't have to chase, right? They can take their wickets when they come. And that's a really important thing over the first 130 years of cricket. It's a little different now, but over the first 130 years of cricket, we had mostly draws, right? So if you have a batting unit who's made 350 and it's taken them 2 days, right? Your bowling lineup's like, we have to get wickets quick, right? We're in front in this game, but we have to get wickets quick. And if we don't get wickets quick, right, the other team might score more than 350 and we're behind the game. I would say the most important batters are the ones who bat really fast or really slow. Because people who bat really slow give your bowlers time to rest. And people who bat really fast give your bowlers time to take more wickets, right? The ones in the middle don't actually move the needle much in either direction, right? But if you're the best combination of opening batter is probably right hand, left hand, tall, short, fast and slow, right? It's Langer, but if Langer was right-handed, if Langer was right-handed, it's almost perfect, right? If Ben Duckett, if Zach Crawley was Mike Atherton, right? That's the kind of partnership that you're looking to put together. And I'm talking from an analytics point of view. I mean, the best partnership ever is to have two Gordon Greenidges, right? Or two Sunil Gavaskars, right? But if you're looking at the sort of to play with the bowler's mind. And so throughout that first half of the history of cricket, the first 80% of cricket, it really did matter that you gave your bowlers enough time to win the games, because most games are drawn. And so you need people to be able to bat quickly, to set the total quickly. And really, you start to see Ian Chappell's side do that, then the West Indies take that on, and then obviously Australia take it to a whole new level. And that's where it becomes really, really important. But the other important thing is, and this is the thing that I kind of knew because I've played in cricket games, but I didn't realize was as important at that, if the top level, was talking to, David Lloyd, Ian Chappell, Rahul Dravid, these sorts of guys. And they all said the same thing. If you have an attacking opener specifically, it just messes with the opposition, because they come out and their opening bowler's like, I'm going to bowl top off stump. I'm going to fade the ball towards slip. So I've got my slips in place. And Vrinder Sehwag slashes it over cover. And he's like, I'll bowl a little bit wider, maybe try and get him. And he slashes it over backward point. He's like, all right.
Yeah, I think with people getting very attacking, Jarrod, I just wanted to check. You also spoken about how bowlers have adjusted their lengths over the period of time in history. And some, earlier they used to bowl full, then a little short, then a little at length and things like that. Especially with spinners, this becomes very critical with the way they float the ball around and, give it more flight time.
Yeah, so to get back to the Sehwag point, right? So you've bowled your two balls to him and he's attacked them, and you now can't bowl outside off stump. So now you bowl on the stumps and he tucks it away on the leg side. Your bowler's gone through 3 plans and your captain's gone through 3 fields already, right? That's what bowling has been doing forever. It started by bowling at the stumps because the pitches weren't very even. And so the whole idea of bowling outside the stump didn't make any sense. Getting a catch into slips was really, really tricky. The best way to get someone out was bowled, right? So you bowl at the stumps. So every generation is going to have a different version of what that is. If you look at Jaiswal, Brook, and Kaminda Mendes, all 3 of those guys, I would suggest the best line to them is wide. And I've never seen that before. The best line has never been wide to anyone. But they've grown up in the wobble ball era where everyone's angling the ball in at the stumps all the time. And they are set up to smash the crap out of them, right? And so you have to go. And you go back to the old spinners. The spinners especially the English spinners and the South African spinners and the New Zealand spinners were finger spinners who were quick and bowled into the pitch, right? Because there was moisture in those wickets, and they were quite often, there was something that they would get out of it by bowling quick. Look at Bisham Beatty. Bisham Beatty is none of those things, right? So he comes out of a thing where you can't get an LBW anymore, and the pitch will spin for you, but it won't spin quickly. And bowling quickly doesn't necessarily help him, especially when he's away from India. In India is a little bit different. And so he has to drag people into position, right? And he has to move them around. So by the time you get to modern cricket, what's the best way for a spinner to get a wicket, right? It's literally doing seam bowlers and spinners do the exact same thing at the vast majority of the time now, which is they bowl a ball that could be LBW bowled or caught behind, right? And that's their best delivery. That's their stock delivery, is having all three in. And you guys are a little bit younger, but you won't remember as much. Like Richard Hadley, like he quite often would bowl outside off stump. Right, that was a normal thing to just come in and keep bowling outside off stump, swinging it away, and eventually the batter will try and play at it, and you hope it. Or he would try and bowl at middle and leg and keep bowled an LBW in, but he's not trying to get a caught behind on those balls or caught in the slips. Now we're combining all that. So the next step is probably, changing the length, going a little bit shorter, going a little bit wider, because the batters will get on top of the wobble ball pretty quickly. You can't be an international batter now without being able to play against all wobble ball, right? I mean, that's basically what happened to Virat Kohli, right? So if you can't adapt with that, so all the players who are coming through first class cricket are already playing against that delivery. So it'll be another delivery, or it'll be using that delivery in a different way in the next generation, right? And that's what will change. How it will change, I don't know, because I would never have predicted the wobble ball, right? I would never have predicted that spinners would get this many LBWs. When I was growing up, literally all you had to do was put your bat roughly near your pad, and you would never be out LBW to a spinner, right? That's all you had to do. It's like, and they will umpire, and I'm a spinner, and I would bowl, and I'd be like, the amount of times I just hit someone, I would pitch the ball middle stump, straighten it, and the umpire would just be like, oh, he's on the front foot. Like, they're always on the fucking front foot. Have you seen my balls bouncing over the top? Like, what are we looking at here? Like, now I play club cricket, and even with opposition players umpiring sometimes, I get LBWs, right? Because people are like, yeah, that's, to be fair, that probably isn't bouncing over.
Do you think it'll get flatter from here on, or do you think the old orthodox flight-based spinners will come into play again?
I think there's always a chance of that, only because I was talking to someone recently. I can't remember what it was, but it was a professional cricketer, and he was saying he's already starting to notice people don't play swing bowling as well now, right? And that's within a generation. A decade ago, you couldn't be an international cricketer if you couldn't play swing bowling, and within a generation, the new crop are coming in not being able to play swing bowling, right? And it's not because they're shit. It's just because they've been playing the wobble ball and people whacking the ball into the surface, and suddenly everyone's bowling swing bowling, right? And so, name a cricketer now who uses their feet 20% of the time when they're facing spin to come down the pitch, right? And a generation ago, we had Pujara and Clark doing it about 40% of the time, 50% of the time, right? We have gone from that to no one doing it, right? It's really rare. So if no one can use their feet to come down, doesn't it make sense for the next generation of spinners to slow down, put the ball back above the eyes, and see what these guys can do again, right? So it should always be like that. I've got a friend who he doesn't get analytics. He thinks that analytics is nerds trying to like solve cricket. And I'm like, that's not what analytics is. Analytics is people trying to stay one step ahead of the game at any stage. So a couple of years ago, I was saying bowl every ball at the top of middle stump, and if it seams back, it hits leg stump, and if it seams away, it hits off stump, or you get an edge into the cordon, right? Now I'm saying bowl wide to Jaiswal, bowl wide to Brook, right? Bowl wide to Kavindu Mendes, right? 5 years ago, I was like, forget swing bowling, everyone, just bowl wobble ball. Now I'm saying, if you could swing it, you probably got a big advantage over some of these guys because they can't do it. So that is what the game is. It is that constant evolution.
All right, because you brought up analytics, before we head into the last segment of rapid fire, well, you can't do these interviews without that. How do you think fans should do the whole wars with their favorite players? What is your expectation out of fans? Do you expect them to, throw your book at their face with the statistics? Personally, like Gandalf and I feel we are erring too much on the side of analytics. This nerdy thing, obsession, has now become too mainstream, wherein the enjoyment of the game has deviated a little bit. There is not a lot of look at Rehan.
Well, you think that you enjoy the game more than I do? I mean, that's what it's a not. I'm not having a go at you. I am having a go at you, but I'm not having a go at you. But I am having a go at you. But when it comes down to it, it's like it's a nonsense thing to say, right? Like, I get former players say that to me all the time. Oh, you know, you don't really enjoy the game, blah blah blah. And I'm like, I don't enjoy the game, motherfucker. I watch 100 hours of cricket a week. How much do you watch? Right? If I didn't enjoy the game, I'd gone off to do something else by now. The game is the only thing keeping me here, right? My media career isn't as you know, my writing career hasn't gone off in the last couple of years. You can't even get freelance writing anymore. I'm here because I love the game, right? It would have been if I'd have moved to basketball writing, I'd be already earning probably twice as much money, right? So I'm here because I love the thing. So what you are saying is other people enjoy the game in a way that you don't enjoy the game, and so you don't like them as much. That's up to us. Who gives a fuck, right? I always said that, and everyone on this call will know what I'm talking about when I say this. Everyone has an auntie or a grandmother that only watches India-Pakistan games. Yeah? Am I wrong? Everyone has that, right? That's a normal thing if you're from India or Pakistan to have an auntie who just likes that game. People will be like, oh, she's not a real cricket fan. She's not there watching Ranji Trophy games. She doesn't care about the test match, right? She doesn't care about Bangladesh, right? Fuck off. She's a cricket fan in her way, right? The same is if you have a cricket fan and they've got spreadsheets in front of them the whole way, who says they're not a bigger cricket fan than you? It's just, it's a nonsense way of looking at the sport, right? And it's exclusionary. And Chris, you are the problem. And you guys can use that anytime you want.
I think thank
any
you,
intro,
Jarrod, for
any promotion you want. Anytime Chris says something, you can just press me playing. You are the problem.
So I used to run a food podcast, Naan Curry, and you've been on it. I know you've a million
Yeah, I thought
podcasts,
I
so you probably
recognized
don't
you.
remember. To bring some masala and fun to this podcast, we're going to do a quick 5-minute rapid fire. Just give me the answer that comes to your mind the first. You don't have to think deeply about your answer.
Yep.
Let me know when you're ready.
I'm ready. I was born ready.
Cool. First
Wait,
question.
I'm not ready. No, I'm ready.
Best leisure in cricket.
I don't know. I don't really think about cricket that way. I suppose Warren was pretty good, but a lot of what Warren said was like, if he'd said it to me, I would have turned around and be like, settle down, mate. So yeah, when you come from Australia, you got to remember the best sledgers in cricket are not the people who play Test cricket. They're the people who play club cricket, which is just like, oh my God, this guy can't play cricket at all, and he's horrendous, and I don't want to be near him. So it's probably someone I played club cricket with when I was like 15 or someone.
Pick a cricketer to babysit your child. Who would you absolutely not pick?
Rishabh Pant.
Which cricketer would you never face in a brawl?
I tell you what, I said some very mean things about Matt Hayden and his commentary over the years, and he's probably heard it. And he's a very big man. I'm not really sure I want him coming over to me and being like, Jarrod, can I show you the list of the things you've said about my commentary here? So maybe he'd be up there. He's an absolute brute. Ben Stokes, of course.
You don't want to meet Stokes outside a bar, right?
No way. We used to joke before the whole thing with Stokes, right? That like we used to have this running joke of which cricketer is most likely to hear a question at a press conference and smash you in the face. And we always had Stokes at the top of our list. So like, yeah, like when that happened, we all went, wow, that we were more right than we thought.
Worst hot take you've ever had that aged like milk?
I once said that Australia should take a dead donkey to England before Steve Smith. To be fair, it was the 2013 series, not the 2017 or 2019 or whatever they were. Yeah, so that didn't go very well. I'm pretty sure I said Simon Kadich would never make test runs consistently, and he had a really good lead into his career. I'm pretty accurate on bowlers. I haven't stuffed up many bowlers that I can think of off the top of my... I mean, I still think that Sunil Narayan would have been a great test bowler. And I don't think you could convince me that I'm wrong about that. I'm trying to think of any others. But yeah, those are probably the main ones. Yes, he has an elbow, Rehan. Lots of bowlers have them.
That's worse than Stuart Broad being better than Dale Steyn.
It really isn't. That is maybe the worst hot take I've ever heard in the history of the sport. And I've heard some rippers.
Worst cricket cliche?
Catches win matches.
Fair enough.
If you've got a really good bowling
What's the-
attack and the other team don't, you're
Most-
going to create like 18 chances. If that was the case, the best fielding sides
Yeah,
would
it's
always
just
win. The
rhymes.
best
That's
fielding
why I
sides
did it.
don't always
Yeah.
win. The best bowling sides almost always win.
Cool. What's the most ridiculous thing you've done in a stadium?
Ah, I've written about this in a book, so it's okay. But yeah, like I've like fingered someone in a stadium. Is that the most like, you know, in the MCG? That'd have to be pretty high up there, wouldn't it? Is that ridiculous? It felt pretty natural at the time.
It's Chris's dream.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I've done anything else weird like that. Do you know what? I do remember this actually. I reckon I pissed on the oval after the players, like the Ashes after, like as a joke. Like I'm pretty sure we did that as a joke late at night. I could be wrong. Like, I've been locked in a ground. I've been locked in the Gabba and the Wacker, so I had to climb a fence at the Wacker to get out. Like late at night when the whole thing was shut down, I was the last person in it apparently, other than the security guard on the pitch, and he couldn't come out to help me. So yeah, I was locked in a test match. One that would probably be up there. I'm trying to think if I've done anything else, like be like vomited on someone or something. I don't think I have. So yeah, those are probably pretty far out there. There's probably some others though that I've just forgotten. And like my friends will be watching this go, those weren't even in your top 5 most ridiculous things.
Given a choice, which IPL team would you love to work for?
PL team. Look, I don't think there's like a special team that like is more close to my heart or anything. I was briefly offered a job with Rajasthan. That didn't quite work out. I was going to take a job with RCB. That didn't quite work out. And I've talked to a couple of other ownership groups. It's really about what the job is. I don't want to go in and be an analyst anymore. I want to run like a whole department, right, that helps them from top to bottom. And so I don't care if it's the Pune Pelicans, right? Like it wouldn't matter who the team is, but I never had a chance to really have a proper budget, have a structure around me to work the jobs that the way I wanted to. And that would be the only thing that would draw me back to working with cricket teams, would be that kind of thing, right? And so with that in mind, I don't care which team it is. I don't care if it's in the PSL or the CPL or the BPL. I would like to do the job correctly once, because I don't think there are many other people that can do all the different things that I do that I can bring to the table. And also I'd like to get paid a lot of money, because that would be nice, because I've been a cricket journalist my whole life, so I'm used to not being paid money. So, you know, buy my book or hire me to run your IPL franchise. I'm available for both.
Yeah, there are only 2 other media people just entering their careers in this call. So thank you.
Yeah, it's fucked. It's all finished, guys. There's nothing left. Honestly, when I came through, there were so many different options and freelancing, and so I know people who did really well without ever having a job in business. I've never actually worked for anyone. All my work has been contract work my entire career. And since COVID, I tell you what, you'd be better off doing a podcast about naan, right, than trying to be a freelance sports journalist these days.
Thank you. Just did my master's and passed out. Thanks.
Yep.
Inspired me.
And also, it's also worth saying you did your master's and I didn't even finish high school. And it's still, my career is more progressed than you are. Like it's dying. It really is. Having a podcast though is a really good step towards it, but it's not like it used to be. I mean, I don't want to slag off these websites, but people like First Post and Sportskeeda, they're paying people like $5 an article sometimes, right? Like, what the hell? How do you even survive on that, right? And you know, when I came through, you could freelance for newspapers, you could freelance for magazines, you could freelance for websites. Everything's in-house now. There's so little freelance available to anyone as a writer. It's really all about podcasting and videos and everything now. But then you have to work out that then you're your own boss and you have to make sure that you make enough money all the time, right? It's a really, really tough gig. And I've said this from the start, it's a dream job, which means that lots of people dream of it. So you're not up against a few people, you're up against millions of people, right? And nothing is made easy in this industry unless you happen to have, you know, your uncle is an Indian player, right? Or, you know, your father understands how the media.
You have my last name, right?
Yeah.
You read my last name?
I just assumed. But I mean, like you look at someone like Freddie Wild, who's had a great career, right? And I would never doubt the amount of work that Freddie has done, and I've been there for it. Like I know that guy is smart and works really hard. But it probably also helped that his dad had been a sports writer for 30 years, right? Like, do you know what I mean? Like it does help. And you see that a lot in this industry. So you might be as talented as Freddie Wild, but he already knows the system because his dad's already been through the system, right? He understands what you need to do, and he's going to work just as hard as you, and he already has a leg up, right? And there are lots of people like that.
Does it help if we get Jarrod on your podcast?
No, it probably hurts. Because what happens when Jarrod comes on his podcast is you make a really valid point and Jarrod shits on you. And now all your fans are going to be like, I mean, they're basically going to think that I think the only person I haven't abused is Candolph. And I could be wrong. Maybe I did and I've forgotten. Right. And so the other three of you guys, you're kind of dead to the society, right? Like, there's going to be like some cricket aggregator site is going to be like, netizens agree, Jarrod Kimber destroys the Sports Entertainment Weekly hosts.
Thank you, Jarrod. I think it was an absolute pleasure talking to you. More than that, absolute pleasure listening to you.
It's funny.
Really
the one guy I didn't abuse is saying that. The other three dead silent.
Yeah, so we all, will probably be able to answer every question on the art of batting once we go through the entirety of your book. But from what we saw, absolutely a lot of insights, insights based on different metrics altogether, not just what you see on spreadsheets, but also interviews, just talking to backyard folks and also players who played in the same era as others, right? So a lot of them, we really look forward to the art of bowling and probably the art of sledging that will probably come after. Wish you the very best for your book, and we'll definitely keep in touch. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Rehan. Thanks, Rachit. Thanks, Jarrod. Bye-bye.